What's up guys, it's Wilson, also known as Design by Will, and in today's video we're going to be designing a t-shirt inspired by one of my first, I think, popular videos was designing a shoe in 3 hours. We're going to be creating the same look and feel slash aesthetic, but using today's sponsor, Kittle. Now, we spent some time sketching and ideating before bringing this into Kittle. One thing that Kittle has improved on is introducing new canvas sizes, which is absolutely amazing. Personally, I use 245 50 by 2700 and a DPI of 300, which brings up the sizing of the canvas a lot. But I really love this because this is the aspect ratio of most t-shirts slash garments. And I found this out just by measuring like how big I would want my graphic. And I was going by 17 by 21 inches. So that's 17 width, 21 height. And I just found that this aspect ratio in Photoshop converted into pixels was perfect. That's what I use. Firstly, let's get straight into it by introducing sort of elements. Like I said, I just did the sketching and I didn't plan this overall designs. So I just went into the Kittle and was looking for elements. Now you can introduce your own elements into Kittle, but I love the fact that you can just browse through different elements, which saves you a lot of time. Now this produced the fundamental focal point for our designs. Now this design is going to be based around a circular environment just because of the nature of this peace sign. And when I design stuff, I try to look at what the focal point is, and whether it's type or something like that, have something where you want people to look straight away, because that's much easier to design around rather than bringing in a bunch of random elements left and right and hoping they work together. I just like to work this way. Next, I just simply bought in a grunge gun. Now, what I love about Kittle is you can type in the aesthetic that you're going for, whether it's grunge or graffiti, and that will have elements around that topic, which also is amazing for saving time, because even getting a look of these sort of grunge aesthetics, meaning you have to draw them in hand or put them through Photoshop and put them through a lot of different distorting elements to get this sort of effect, or by a scanner, I guess. So yeah, that's why I love this whole aesthetic. We'll head over to the object settings and add in some fundamental color just to separate the two objects apart and understand what the bad or evil is. Also, we just need to add some sort of pop of color because black and red tends to be my safe space in terms of design, and why fix it if it ain't broken, honestly. Now we've got the premise of our design and we're no longer working with a blank canvas. We're just going to be looking at some different types of grunge typography. Also, so we're not looking at blank type. So what I like to do when I'm designing is I get a bunch of different type options if I'm not using hand-drawn custom type, and I go through in my brain which one looks the best. And I was just having a look at all the different ones Kittle has to offer and which one fits the aesthetic the most. For my typography, I ended up going with 60 Skate Hunt, I believe, and Telegraphim. I chose these ones because they fit the aesthetic of the grunge elements that we were going with, and it works well in bringing unison to the design. After spending almost 20 minutes trying to get this sort of bend to match properly, I ended up thinking to myself, why am I making this harder on myself when there's a circular transformation tool right there? I don't know. But anyway, this is what goes through design. You go through a lot of changes and understanding of what type of look you're going for, and most of the time you're doing it the hardest way because you're trying to learn, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but just to save time, always make sure to check out the templates first. Just to save some time, I just duplicated the first transformation that says love not and put war at the bottom of it, and right clicked and just spun around the font just so it read better and it wasn't upside down. Make sure you're centering everything as you go along, just so when you go to export something, it doesn't look wrong. After we've got our type and placement where we want it, we're going to start adding in the fundamental effects to bring this design together. Firstly, I'm just simply going to duplicate the first love knot, and I'm going to be titling it in the layers panel, love knot top, and then love knot, which is the original one. Add in a different color and start adding effects to the one underneath, because that's where our drop shadow is going to be. First things first, go to the third effects thing, which is underneath shading, and start playing with the offset until you get it how you want it. So right now I have it set to 12 and I have my angle set to -87, almost like as it's casting a shadow on a piece of brick or something like that. That's the type of look I was going for, and it ended up working really fine. Now that we got our aesthetic, we can start doing the same thing to the bottom type, which is war. Like I said before, just duplicate it, holding Option and dragging upwards, and then head over to the layers panel. Make sure you're labeling your layers, and then head over to the effects panel, shading, and go to the third option where you can start adding in the same effects. So it's going to be 12, but the only thing that's going to be changing is the angle, because it's at the bottom, but you want the angles to match up, so it might be negative or reverse what the top is. And is it really a streetwear brand if you don't have stars randomly on the t-shirt? Ask yourself that. Is it really a streetwear brand? No, I'm just kidding. These sort of grunge stars match the aesthetic perfectly. So I grouped the prime elements, which is the love knot, the peace sign, gun, and war. So I wasn't going to get them confused, because we're going to be adding these stars randomly, and they're going to be starting to fill up the layer panel a lot. So just making sure you group your important elements first before you start adding in a bunch of random stars, because you don't want to get lost in the sauce. That's about it. Lastly, I just added in a cross to cover up the T, because the typography wasn't just, it wasn't screaming grunge to me. So I had to add in an element that was grunge, a little bit more grunge, just so I can make it match the rest of the aesthetic going on. One key thing I also really like about Kittl is the object settings show you what color is on what part. So you can just remove the color or add in a different color very easily. And that's going to be the fundamental design for the front. You can go ahead and add in more elements, add in more effects, but that's it basically. And just to finish it up and add some final touches, just so it's not looking very uniform when it comes to the styles and everything, I'm going to go ahead and adding these little splattered effects in the abstract panel, like graffiti and stuff like that. And I'm just going to be adding it to the background of certain elements, just so it looks like they're dripping or the color is bleeding in some sort of way, and add that sort of effect just to make it more grunge. Now for design 2, or the back design, we're going to be looking for a skull that matches the same aesthetic as the front. Now I see a bunch of them, I think sort of by the same artist or same aesthetic, that matches perfectly, but we don't want those. Those look a little bit too matchy. It's about building elements, bringing them in, making them contrast, but making them flow effectively. And there's a lot of options here, but I'm just going to go through and find the best one for me personally. After picking my skull, I just bought in a eyeball that looks like it's been through threshold. They have a lot of good options, but I just really like the mood / aesthetic of this one. It looked like she was down or he was down, and they just wasn't feeling the vibe. Next, I just bought in some fundamental elements from design 1, just so everything is working together respectfully. Even though we're going to be changing a lot of things like the star motif, we're going to be keeping throughout the aesthetic of the design, just because it works very nicely. And after here, we can start putting everything together. So just holding shift, I'm just warping this skull so it's not so elongated and it matches the eye socket of this eyeball. And I'm just going to be using some sort of wizardry to make this fit perfectly. And the way you do that basically is you create a duplicate of the skull and make sure the symmetry is there, and it fits perfectly. And after that, you can go ahead and delete the remaining eyeball and the other side of the skull, and you have a perfectly symmetry eyeball to the skull. Does that make sense? I don't know. That whole sentence didn't make sense. I'm so sorry. But you get what I'm saying. Next, we're just going to make this skull black, and you can see the design coming together. I'm just bringing in the eyeball a little bit more, just so it's resting directly on the nose, whatever that thing is called. But yeah, after we've changed the color of all the elements and we've got the fundamental focal point of our design, we're going to start introducing typography. Now, I'm going to be using a combination of the two types that were mentioned earlier before, that's 60s Skehunt and Telegraphem. I'm going to be using Telegraphem for the capital R and N of revision, just because I wanted some sort of individuality with using these fonts, because you can't really edit the fonts in themselves, but you can add to them and you can make them look like they're meant to be together. And that's the one thing that I really like, is being able to design regardless of the tools that are presented in front of you, because most people think you need everything, like all the best tech, everything like that. Like, no, you could literally build this whole graphic on an iPad if you just had the patience and time, and also if you had the creativity. So it's not about the tools, it's about the person utilizing the tools. I tried to add this star to cover the O, just to add in another element that would work with the elements from design 1, but it wasn't working. But this sparked an idea. Like, I could create the same sort of aesthetic that we have in design 1 with the type and the offset path, but bring it all together within this design. So that's what I did. I made a duplicate, I deleted it, and made a group 1, which was going to be the main typography, and a group 2, which was going to be the bottom one. And essentially, I just added in the same effects that we had prior. So going on the bottom one where we're adding our effects, we're just going to the third one in the effects panel, and we're gonna have to make this a lot more dramatized, because it's gonna be taking up a larger area than the design typography from design 1. So just pause and copy my settings, and we're going to be applying that to the N and also the R. But with the R, regarding the angle, we're going to be dragging that angle going inwards, so it looks like it's what's it called, what's that word, it's like cutting off towards the middle of the back, if that makes sense. But that's, yeah, just using the angle and using an outline width to sort of create some sort of border around this typography so there's no sharp edges. Next, we're just going to apply the same aesthetic to the R to bring the whole type together, and it's really starting to look very unison now. And I really like how it's turning out, honestly. And overall, this is an amazing looking type. From here, you can start seeing the design come together. Lastly, it's just time to add in our stars and any other fundamental elements that could also play on what design 1 has to offer. So yeah. After having all our elements ready, the design is looking nice and complete, but Kittl also has grunge textures, which is amazing. So the way you get these grunge textures to work on your design is making sure that you group everything into one group, add in the texture that you want, and pressing clip content. And after that, the texture is strictly on your design. And I really love this feature, because now the design has elevated completely just by introducing some sort of texture. So after getting the design all complete, I went ahead and added in this circle threshold just to play on the circular nature of design 1 and keep that unison with this design. Also, I did try and add in a sort of typography for revision. I'm still working on myself, which is the slogan, but it wasn't working, and I just thought I was adding too much elements. So I went ahead and just centered everything, made sure everything looked good, and added a texture to design 1, and that was the design complete. Just to finish it up, I exported it as a PDF, which is what you would send to your manufacturer for print, but I wanted to see it on our new mockup coming to the updates for the texture pack. We're going to have a pro version and also the version that we have now. The pro version won't have expanded lines. It will allow you to draw and edit these from scratch yourself if you wanted to, but I really wouldn't recommend it if you're still learning. I would still recommend just the light version, which is only $5. And yeah, I also brought it into Photoshop just to see what it would look like on a realistic mockup. If you want to learn how to make realistic mockups, check out the Studio Wheel Patreon. I have a whole video showing you how to make a realistic mockup using any photo of any garments. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I'll see you when I see you. I love you. Peace.